and hear what they really have to say. I've been hired by victims because the district attorney's office did not want to listen to them. I think that has to change immediately. I think witness safety too is another thing. I was asked in a we have to protect witnesses. If we protect witnesses and they feel protected and they trust the district attorney's office, they're much more willing to come forward to testify. There is an inherent distrust that we have to work on. I think also too, the other thing is we have to hire who we hire as an assistant DAs is a very important thing. They are on the front lines. They are talking to people and talking to victims, talking to witnesses, sometimes defendants. There has to be some sort of emotional IQ of understanding people. It's not just a legal job, it's a people job. And we can't forget that. And I think that that's really the most important thing, is hiring people who understand that part of the job is to really talk and interact with people and understand their stories. And that's the most important thing that they are going to do as assistant DAs. And I think that will go a long way for victims and witnesses.
Thank you, Ms. Crotty. All right, for the next question, we're going to have, Ms. Lang lead off. So the question is, short again, mercifully, as district attorney, would you change the existing policy with respect to the disclosure of discoverable material?
I don't know what the status is at this moment of discoverable material, but I believe that we need to implement open file discovery, but ensure that there are protections for vulnerable victims. So that means seeking protective orders when it comes to disclosing personal identifying information of victims who are at risk, but otherwise being totally transparent with the defense. One practice that I used was akin to a reverse proffer, in which I invited people who were charged with crimes to come in with their lawyers so I could lay the evidence out for them so that there are no surprises. And I would encourage every prosecutor in my office to undertake a similar process at the very early stages of the case. No one should be playing hide the ball here.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. Ms. Crotty.
I mean, I think that the disclosure, I've practiced in all 5 of the boroughs, sometimes not really Staten Island, but in all the other bureaus, when you go and do an arraignment and they give over, and especially in misdemeanor cases, they give over all the discovery and at least all the police paperwork. I think that especially too, when there's a non-victim case, all the paperwork should be handed over immediately, what's in their possession. I think that the more information that is given, and I know this as a defense attorney, the more information is given, the better you can defend your client and to the situation that they're realistically facing. And I think that the more information that is being given helps the entire case, both for the district attorney's office and for the defense. And I think that it should be an equal playing field of giving information when they get it. I do think that with victim cases and witness ID, those are special cases, and I think that has to have some sort of consideration for that. But in general, everything should be given over as in time as to when they get it.
Thank you, Ms. Crotty. Mr. Quart, same question.
Whoever the district attorney is in 2022 will have to comply with specific standards of discovery and disclosure because of the laws I helped negotiate in Albany and that we in Albany passed, and with no help from the district attorney, Cy Vance, at that time. In fact, he's been objecting to it for the better part of 5 years. And it's important to note that because of a question that came back earlier about what is the role of advocacy for the district attorney. And as it turns out, it's a lot for Manhattan because Cy Vance has been at the forefront through the District Attorneys Association of fighting discovery reform for a better part of 10 to 15 years. I'm proud of my work in Albany, opposing Vance, opposing the District Attorneys Association, enforcing basic disclosure, which stands for this basic premise. We do not move forward with a case. We do not seek to deprive somebody of their liberty before we turn over basic discovery to their defense attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Quart. Ms. Weinstein.
Do not move forward with a case. We do not seek to
Thank
deprive
you.
somebody of their liberty.
A new law went into effect a year ago, requiring the state to come into line with what was basically the practice beforehand in Brooklyn of early and open discovery and an emphasis on early. And the time periods have adjusted now in terms of how many days you get after the first appearance, but the change is basically the same, in keeping with what we had done and also in keeping with my own practice as a federal prosecutor. I said earlier that a criminal trial, litigation, is a search for truth. And I think that early and open disclosure of information is a key component of that. And in fact, in my supervision of the Conviction Review Unit, we also vacated convictions where prosecutors had not complied with their discovery and constitutional obligations to disclose information to the defense.
Thank you, Ms. Weinstein. Ms. Orleans.
So I remember when Cy Vance ran for Manhattan District Attorney on the promise of open file discovery, and then he proceeded to spend the next decade fighting against it and allowing the district attorneys in his office to routinely hide the ball, as people referred to it as, and hide evidence from the defense, not turn things over, tell us that our lunch break was sufficient to review hundreds of pages of discovery and evidence, and leading in the middle of trial or the morning of trial. And that is absolutely insufficient. It needs to go so much further than that. And so I believe that every Manhattan DA candidate should not only be in favor of open file discovery, but truly, except for genuine work product, the prosecutor's entire case file should be shared electronically and available at all times to the defense. And immediately upon when the prosecution has any of that, it should be shared with the defense immediately. And I know the repercussions of not having that after spending over a decade as a public defender.
Thank you, Ms. Orleans. Ms. Ibushi.
As a trial attorney, I've had my fair share of prosecutors withhold and manipulate evidence in the middle of trial or even during in a case. And I think as people who hold positions of public trust, those who have engaged in that behavior should not serve in those positions. Open file discovery is necessary. To do anything else is to accept the violation of our constitutional rights, which requires transparency, especially when it comes time to the restrictions of our freedoms. So regardless of what the legislature is doing, and make no mistake, this problem didn't start with Vance. It's been the culture of our prosecution system for ages. We must allow open file discovery. I will make that initiative, and I will also have management and partner with agencies like Court Watch to ensure that our prosecutors are adhering to these requirements, while also ensuring that the community and defense attorneys, as well as civil rights attorneys, are being made aware of all efforts to ensure transparency to the maximum extent possible.
Thank you, Ms. Ibushi. Mr. Bragg.
Full and early disclosure is fair, just, humane. It's what the Constitution requires, and it's what I've done throughout my career. And I'll say we don't have to wait on Albany. When I was at the Attorney General's office, one of my first duties as chief deputy was, prior to the bail law being changed, retraining the entire division to focus them on the non-cash option. So that's the type of leadership I would bring to the DA's office, not waiting on Albany. And one specific issue I want to lift up, which others haven't addressed, is police misconduct and the disclosure of that. I fought hard side by side with advocates for the repeal of 50A, which used to provide overly protective, insane protection to police officers' disciplinary records. We need to continue to breathe life in that. I submitted an amicus brief along with other folks. The unions are trying to push back on that. We need to make sure that that is fully honored by our prosecutors, because that's a big, big piece of the equation for discovery.
Thank you, Mr. Bragg. We're in the home stretch. Last question. And this one is going to
I actually didn't answer.
Oh, Ms. Florence, sorry. You fell off my radar screen. Please.
No worries. Should I start now?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Yeah, so to me, discovery is not simply about documents, because you can dump lots of documents, especially in the age of digitized evidence. It's very important for the defendant and the defense attorney to understand the evidence. Throughout my career, I engaged in open discovery before that was even a thing. And what I did was not only give the evidence over, but have an open door policy where I met with defense attorneys and explained the evidence to make sure that we were all on the same page. on the other side, I also listened because sometimes we get it wrong. And it's important when the defense attorney has all the evidence that we listen to the defenses and make sure that the case that has been charged is the case that can be proven.
Thank you, Ms. Florence. And now for the last question. And we propose that we're going to have you answer this, and then we're going to let you have 2 minutes in closing. So as you're listening to other people, you might think about it, because I've been so rigorous with the timekeeping. We seem to have enough for you to be able to do a closing statement, which I'm actually quite delighted about. So
just to clarify, I think we can do 2 minutes total, including their answer to the next question.
2 minutes total.
Yeah.
Everybody clear? Okay. Ms. Crotty, you're going to start us off. And the final question is, what would you do to address the concern of some that favorable treatment is given to high profile and well-connected defendants? And would there be any piece of that that would involve reparations or remedial action of any sort?
I mean, I think you have to have basic fairness. You have transparency, and you treat every case the same. And I think if that is your goal, then you can do it. I have said from the beginning on day one that you have to look at each and every case to get the fair and right result. And that doesn't matter how poor you are or how rich you are. That's just the way you should look at. And if that is the matrix in which you look at every case, I think that that's where you get fundamental fairness. And I think that that's where you get equity. And so that's what I would do on every case. I know that there are disparate impacts at times. I know that firsthand because I've represented people with disparate impacts, but I do think it doesn't change the matrix of how you look at the case, because when you're the district attorney, you look at it to be fair and to get the right thing and to do the right thing in each and every case. And that's what I would do. I'm here tonight because I want to be the next district attorney. I'm here tonight because I think I've presented a realistic vision of understanding New York and the city that we live in and that we love. I grew up here, I'm from here, and I've been here, and my whole career has been here. I think my whole career has been rooted in 100 Center Street, both as a defense attorney and as a prosecutor. I think that we can really make the system work better and work for all of us. And that's what I propose to do. No one here has had the perspective of both sides as I have in the building, and no one here can know fundamentally what is going on in that building. In fact, I still am working today. I still do cases. I have a court appearance tomorrow. I know what's going on in the building, and I know how to fix it, and I know what to concentrate on, and I have the best understanding of the system, and it has been 20 years in the making, and that is what makes me the best candidate to be the next DA. My website is lizcrotty2021.com. If you have any questions, please contact me there. I thank you all tonight for coming, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ms. Crotty. Ms. Orlins, 2 minutes.
This is for the answer and then our closing, yes?
Yes.
Got it. So I think it's time to restore trust and integrity to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. No one is above the law. I will ensure that those who are wealthy, powerful, or well-connected who break the law are held accountable by creating specialized bureaus that combat corrupt public officials, exploitative landlords and employers, as well as law enforcement officers who commit acts of physical abuse and perjury and who engage in violations of civil rights. I think it's incredibly important, and I've spent my entire career as a public defender, so I've seen the way in which our current system polices people and harms communities. And in the more than a decade I've spent going up against Cy Vance's office, I've represented over 3,000 people charged with crimes, as many as 180 cases at one time, on cases ranging from turnstile jumping to homicide. And for every case that I've worked on, I've managed countless moving parts. I've led teams, interviewed witnesses, taken cases all the way to trial, and I've had to do that on a limited budget without ever losing sight of the human beings at the heart of each case. We must stop elevating career prosecutors to positions of power. We must finally acknowledge what the harms of this system really, really have meant. And that's why someone like me, a public defender, someone who has spent my career fighting against this office in court, makes me the most prepared to implement the policies that I speak of and to make sure that our criminal legal system is taken on in a way that is going to dismantle the system that currently exists, that makes sure that we hold police officers accountable and make sure that all of this misconduct is identified, called out, and then rectified. And I think that there is, there's so much that needs to be done. Sorry, sirens, this is my neighborhood. And I come at this of the perspective of having represented thousands of people and seen the way that this has really impacted their lives. And I would be honored to receive your support. And thank you for having me tonight and for such a great forum. And thanks for the timekeeping and everything else.
Thanks, Ms. Orleans. Mr. Bragg.
There's no doubt that there's two systems of justice. There's one that has allowed those with privilege to avoid accountability for far too long. Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, the former doctor at Columbia who sexually assaulted dozens of patients. And then that's the first system. Then there's the second system, one that has been unduly harsh for people who look like me, people in communities of color, people who are in poverty, people with mental health issues. I know that second system of justice. I've grown up in it. My family's still in it. I was over-policed. Many of my friends overcharged and through the system. Family that's been incarcerated. I know the system firsthand. I also know not just the civil rights challenges of the system, but the public safety issues that are beset upon those of us in the second system. Having faced down the barrel of a gun 6 times in my life, I know that firsthand. I know the challenges of reentry through my family members who've gone through that, one of whom has lived with me. It's important to know this work personally. I've built on that personal knowledge with a career that's fought for 20 plus years in the courtroom for both civil rights and public safety. There's no one here who can say that both a civil rights lawyer and a former prosecutor. I'm representing Eric Garner's family fighting for justice there, and I've prosecuted an FBI agent. I've done cases involving gun trafficking and heinous sex offenses. I've lived every bit of this system. I'm ready on day one to inherit the Trump case, to take on the flow of illegal guns into our city, to deal with the reentry and civil rights issues on day one. This is my life. This is my life's work. Justice cannot wait. I'm ready.
Thank you, Mr. Bragg. Mr. Quart.
Yes, the problem about when candidates talk about what day one in office will look like is that it really poses the question, will day one of their term in office be any different than year 10 or year 9 or year 8 of Cy Vance's tenure? And that is really the distinction in this race. It is for me and all the other candidates in this race, but certainly those who are prosecutors. Who is really going to bring about that fundamental change of this office? Who is really committed to ripping apart and rebuilding an office that I don't think functions well for basic values and Democrats in Manhattan or all 1.6 million Manhattanites in Manhattan? And my argument to everyone is, look at my history. Look at the fights I've taken on over the last 10 years. I have taken on Vance. I've taken on the New York Post. I have fought these fights. And most importantly, I've had to actually answer to voters in primary and general elections and defend my views on decarceration and reform of our criminal legal system. On that critical issue, on that critical question to everyone, who's really going to stick with it? Who's going to really stick with these reforms when the regressive voices that exist in this city go after the DA? I think you can answer. There's no guesswork with me. You know from my record, you know from my fights, you know from my standing for re-election with these battles in Albany and in the courtroom that I will stick with it and I will go forward with the vision that I have outlined for you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Quart. Ms. Florence.
The Manhattan DA, your next DA, must have deep experience in the criminal law, doing the cases in the trenches, but also management of diverse teams and an innovative approach. But most important, it requires someone with a vision. There is no one in this race that has my combination of management experience, practical experience, and vision. And that comes out of the work that I did every single day for almost 25 years. I know how to find the cases that impact people. I know how to manage the people who will bring those cases, and I know how to make sure the work is done and with high morale. My career started more than 25 years ago in the very office I seek to lead. I fought there against a concierge system under this DA, and I fought for people who never thought they'd win. I went up time and time again against powerful interests inside and outside the office. I prosecuted large-scale corruption. Trump case is coming either by this DA or the next one, and there is no one better equipped to handle that case. No matter what the Vance brings, there is more to be done. There's wage theft, there's vendor fraud, there's sexual assault. There are so many things that could be done against Mr. Trump, and you need someone who has that deep experience. My experience is about landmark convictions, innovating in the criminal law. I have done cases involving 9/11 fraud, domestic violence, international trafficking of guns and contraband, and I have focused on tenants and immigrants and workers. As your DA, I will continue to fight against the power. I will stand up to them on behalf of everyday New Yorkers, because that's what I've done my entire life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Florence. Ms. Weinstein.
Thank you so much. You know, as I look over my notes for what we talked about in the last 2 hours, for me, every single one of these subjects comes back not just to experience, but to leadership experience and diversity of experience. I'm thinking about violent crimes, the questions we had about gun trafficking, about domestic violence, about the insecurity that people are feeling in terms of their personal safety, which I saw so many questions about in the side comments that we didn't get to innovation, to having experience leading, creating innovation programs, whether it's diversion or a whole new program of using civil litigation to look out for the most vulnerable. And of course, the management experience of having worked in the front office of an office just like this one, in advocating, in doing the work of reform, transformation, modernization of the office, of disseminating policies into the office on every important subject, including discovery, of evaluating prosecutors differently. And, you know, I think the next person who is going to assume this historic office is going to do so at a time where this borough is really traumatized by the pandemic and by all of the dislocations that have followed from it, insecurity around people's mental health, loss of jobs, a change in the way the streets feel. And at a moment of crisis like that, there's no time to waste. There's no time to say, well, I did something similar in a similar case, or I had an idea that was interesting. Let me now try to put it into motion. We need to have somebody in this role who can draw on experience in the federal system, the state system, inside of courts, standing in front of judges, working with judges, having taught all of the subjects that we talked about tonight, and again, having led so that we can get through this next difficult period in New York City and do the very best that we can for our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weinstein. Ms. Lang.
I launched this campaign with a plan to address precisely this issue, Professor, because there is no equal justice without equal access. So I'm committed to a district attorney's office in which there are no backroom meetings, in which public defenders have the same access to the district attorney and district attorney's senior staff that the most well-heeled white shoe defense attorneys have. And any even suggestion that someone has special access to the district attorney but by dint of who they are or who their attorney is undermines the public's confidence in the system, and that must not stand. I am also committed to including public defenders on the transition team to assist in building precisely the infrastructure that's needed to operationalize these transformative reforms and to serving in an ongoing fashion on an advisory council. I am committed to having line assistants and and defense attorneys present for all meetings and negotiations about what's going to happen on cases, because the worst thing that can happen is for the district attorney to take a private meeting with the defense attorney and then to come out and issue a decision that undermines the public's confidence with no explanation. On Super Bowl Sunday, several years ago, 2 masked gunmen came out from behind a car and opened fire, hitting 5 people and killing 1. I worked with the family who lost the young man that night to build the case and prosecute it. And the day after the conviction, I called the mother of the young man who'd been killed and asked how she felt. And she said, when I woke up, I slept all night for the first time since he was killed. But when I woke up, all I could think about were the moms of those two young men, referring to the men who had just killed her son. I have lived in Harlem for close to 20 years. I'm from the city. I served in Chinatown, and I will be a district attorney for everyone in Manhattan, in every neighborhood, uptown, downtown, the Upper East and Upper West Sides, Harlem and Washington Heights. I, as a national criminal justice reform leader and a former assistant district attorney, am committed to a system that treats everyone with dignity. I hope that you'll join me. Follow me on my website, votelucylang.com, and on social media @LucyLangNYC. I would be so proud to stand with you three estimable clubs in moving my candidacy forward. Thank you for a really vibrant conversation tonight and for your service to the city.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. Ms. Ibushi, the last word is yours.
Thank you so much. To get back to the first part of the question, people of color have been made to be the face of crime in this city. As someone that grew up with incarcerated parent, I spent over 2 decades growing up through the prison system, seeing my family struggle, seeing my mother figure out how to handle 10 kids who are at 10 different places in their life, and living with the stigma that comes with prosecution and incarceration. That is the experience that's missing from all of our colleagues that I've heard from here today. Firsthand community experience in surviving the damage and destruction that the system has caused. And while people of color are targeted and torn down by this system, we see time and time again, people who are powerful and privileged escape accountability, escape any kind of liability, and be offered as many exceptions as possible. And so even the question about Trump that we see in the media is, should we prosecute someone like Trump, who's been accused of rape and sexual assault and stealing from charities and theft and robbery and harassment and all the scary stuff that we're told we are going to be subject to if we allow equal justice to persist in our city. So there has to be one system for everyone, but it's going to take somebody who has lived through these experiences and has held the powerful and privileged accountable to make that happen. And so while many of my colleagues here can make these promises, they've all had an opportunity to actually do something about it and be fearless in the face of power. And unfortunately, that has not happened. That's why we have a ton of oversight agencies against the NYPD, but not one could have secured the prosecution of a police officer when I have done it 3 times already. It's been very difficult to have victims heard in the process. And so regardless of how many programs we have in place, are we going to have somebody that has the lived experience fighting for victims of police violence and other crimes alike, to actually get this job done? I'm the only candidate that has navigated these adversarial waters for a decade and have worked to change policy, change the culture and ideology of our city, of our law enforcement, of the prosecution system. That is what it's going to take to change Manhattan. We can't have more of the same thing and expect a different outcome. That is what got us here. And that is why the voters of Manhattan are asking for something completely and utterly different. I am the only candidate to offer you that. I did not have to work for decades to incarcerate communities, destabilize families, or watch incarcerated communities like they're some kind of zoo to do something about it. I come from these communities. I'm passionate about ensuring the stability and safety of all New Yorkers and looking forward to a future where we have high graduation rates, entrepreneurship rates, homeownership rates, and I got muted in the middle of it, but if that's my cue, I'm just going to wrap up and say, we need something different for Manhattan. I am that something different, and I enjoy these experiences all on my own. And I look forward on taking on this momentous task with the community, with all of you by my side. Thank you so much for this amazing event tonight, and I look forward to earning your support as the next district attorney of Manhattan.
Thank you, Mr. Ibushi. Thank you to every one of you for the sustained and rigorous engagement. It gives me hope for our future. And now I'm going to give this back to Alec, who's going to close us out.
Great. Well, first, thank you so much, Professor Brett Dignam, for doing an outstanding job moderating for us, to all of the candidates for taking the time to be here with us. I want to thank my colleague Pablo Zevallos for administering the logistics, all of the behind the scenes work of the Zoom meeting. I want to recognize some of our elected officials who are with us, State Senator Robert Jackson and City Council Member Helen Rosenthal. The primary election for district attorney is June 22nd, 2021. In the meantime, there is a fundraising deadline on January 11th, which I'm sure all of the candidates will be working hard toward. So thank you for taking the time to be with us, and please be sure to vote this year. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, everyone. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So much.
Thanks.